Hello everyone and welcome to Cineful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the grey. Today's video we have a Black Library review for Warhammer 40,000. Today we're going to be checking out Wrath of the Lost, a Flesh Terrors novel by Chris Forrester. Now, this one is narrated by Richard Reed on the audio version, which I listen to. I always listen to audios, or for the most part, I listen to audios. I like to listen to them while I'm doing other hobby, doing some work around the house, or indeed doing some editing on the computer and stuff like that. But this was really well done by Richard Reed, who is easily, I think, one of the best voice actors, narrators that Black Library have working for them on a regular basis. Chris Forrester, I think he had one of these short stories about the Flesh Terrors in the Successes. If that wasn't him, I'm sorry, I might be forgetting, but I think that's correct. With that said, let's get cracking on into the review and check out the story. And so the story, ordered by Gabriel Seth to secure Cretacia. Chaplain Duma and Apothecary Barashal set course for the Flesh Terrors' homeworld. But when they finally lay eyes on it once more, will they find a garrison standing firm, or a desolate wasteland scoured by their enemies? The Space Marines must walk in the footsteps of their chapter's mythic founder, and along the way they will learn what it means to embrace the wrath of the lost, or die trying. Now, this is an interesting story because this is all about Primaris Space Marines. Primaris Space Marines who've never been to Cretacia before, and effectively taking place just after sort of the war against Baal, the war on Baal, I should say, against the Tyranids of High Fleet Kraken and all of that. They're the reinforcements that have been given to Gabriel Seth, and he sort of sent them back to, make sure Cretacia's around because, they were never expecting to actually go back there, the Flesh Terrors. They were expecting to die. And so, this story's purpose, though, the story, once again, is another tale that really is telling us about Primaris Marines trying to become, true Space Marines of their newfound brotherhood, their new chapter that they've been assigned to by Rabute Gilliman. They're no longer unnumbered sons, they're no longer, the sons of Sanguinius or whatever. They are now Flesh Terrors, and they're trying to, or at least some of them are trying to very much become proper Flesh Terrors. And there are some that maybe see things as, these are things of the past, maybe we should move on, maybe we are the new Flesh Terrors and we should sort of move on in this particular way. But, it's another story that's sort of showing this, and we've seen things like this of the Wolf Time in the Dawn of Fire series, was very much the same sort of story about the Space Wolves. But another thing this really focuses on is the fact that the Black Rage and the Red Thirst are still heavily affecting the Sons of Sanguinius, and those Blood Angel successors that were heavily affected already, like the Flesh Terrors, are still heavily and over the top affected by this, despite Belisarius Caul's best efforts and, his guarantees that, these curses and these flaws had been cured. And so we have our main characters, Chaplain Duma and Apothecary Barashal. Now, these two main characters are interesting because I don't think either of them are likable in any aspect. It's an interesting story because I didn't mind the story at all, but I found the two main characters absolutely awful. I hated them. There were definitely other secondary characters that I liked much more. They were two characters sort of arguing on very differing points but not seeing the whole picture, and it actually gets mentioned partway through the story that they together are pretty good, but either one being individual is not really the greatest part because they both have massive flaws in their ideologies and their thoughts and their wants and their needs and all of that. But Duma is very much a chaplain who embraces the Black Rage, embraces the curse, but doesn't really care much for Cretacia. And on the other hand, you have Barashal, who really thinks Cretacia is their salvation, but wants to kill them, wants to get rid of that Black Rage, and doesn't believe, like maybe Chaplain Duma does, that it is, their one pathway to remember their father. And so what changes about these main characters over the course of the story? They certainly don't become more likable. If anything, they clash more and more as this story comes to its conclusion, and this really creates a lot of conflict, but it does make for an interesting read. It's just that you don't like the main characters, and I think that's an interesting sort of look. Does it maybe harm the overall story? I mean, it was a 15-hour audio listen, and I powered through it pretty well. I can't say I didn't enjoy it, but it definitely, those two main characters, you're just like, wow, can one of you just get your comeuppance? Can something happen to one of you? Can one of you see the light? Can one of you see the whole picture? And maybe we get that at the end, but I still don't think entirely. I think it's really, a little bit there. For me, I think my favourite character, just as a side note, is definitely the Dreadnought, which is a old Marine Dreadnought, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it's really interesting. The characters clash more and more as the story goes on. Rather than resolving those issues, I think these issues by the end of the story become even bigger. Now, what does this book do well? For me, the high point of the story is certainly how the book shows Cretaceous, I think. I remember reading, the story, I can forget the name of the one where Gabriel, the Flesh Terror first actually lands on Cretaceous. I can't remember the name of the story, the little short novella. But anyway, this really shows, the tribes, the world, the fauna and flora, all of it's pretty well, nicely depicted, and shows, the savage world that sort of, I guess, the Flesh Terrors really embrace as their own, and it becomes part of them, this sort of crazed world, this sort of savage, dangerous, very violent world is, of course, responsible for how the Flesh Terrors are, like so many other Space Marine chapters. But who would enjoy this story? For me, this is definitely, someone who likes those crazed, sort of mad, bloodthirsty warriors that are the Flesh Terrors. For me, this is, maybe for Flesh Terrors fans only. I don't think it's a particularly Marine chapter that maybe if you're not a fan of the Flesh Terrors, you're not a fan of these more savage Space Marine chapters, this isn't maybe a story you would enjoy. I definitely think this is going to have a very niche audience in who would enjoy this. I like Flesh Terrors. My cousin and Stephen, who helps out regularly with battle reports on the channel, has a Flesh Terrors army. And he really likes the Flesh Terrors. I can't wait to hear his thoughts on this. But yeah, I think this is going to have a very particular audience with who this would appeal to. I can't say I'd recommend this as just a generic one-off story because, like I said, those main two characters are super unlikable. But it does have a good story for Flesh Terrors in it. And so, in summary, I mean, I can't stress enough, I hate the main characters in this story. Absolutely hate them. I think they're both absolute jerks. And my opinion of them does not change throughout the story. I can't say I was rooting for either of them to succeed, other than the fact I like Gabriel Seth as a character, so I want the Flesh Terrors to stick around. But maybe that's the idea. There are definitely stories talking about where, like, Space Marines are sort of aloof or they're not very nice to humanity. They are sort of above and distant from it. And maybe that's the idea the author was going for, and that is the case. I think they definitely nailed it, because the Space Marines towards the humans in this are absolute jerks. This was definitely enjoyable, though. I can't say I disliked the story. I just disliked those two main characters. It had some great depictions of Cretaceous. It had some really cool instances of the Death Company being shown, which is pretty cool. There were some cool fight scenes and some cool, interesting sort of secondary adversaries and plot-moving adversaries, which were nice to see as well. But if you've listened to this, if you've read this, I'd love to know your thoughts on the book. What you thought. Did you actually like the main characters, or did you hate them just like me? But as always, I think half the enjoyment of this, especially from a narrated point, is Richard Reed is fantastic. And he brought maybe what was a subpar to average story up a level as well. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. And so that's the end of the video. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And if you did enjoy the video and you want to say something, leave us a comment down below and let us know what you thought. If you'd like to come chat more with me and other members of our great little community here at Cinderful Gaming, we have a Discord server linked down in the video's description. Also, down there in the video's description are the best ways to help support the channel if you'd like to do so. You can either grab yourself some merch via our Teespring or Ko-fi stores, which are linked down there, or our Patreon and YouTube members, where you can help support the channel, get yourself a shout out, and indeed, if you're a YouTube member as well, get yourself some cool emotes to use in our live discussions, or indeed on your comments on YouTube. As a special thank you to all our Patreon and YouTube members, we'd like to give you all a shout out. So thank you to our Patreons, Christian Weir, Soren, Kenny Lowe, Outer and Shot First, Andrew Bowen, The Rising 8, Q Dynamic, Anthony B, JJ Austrian, Average Wargaming, Domir, Mark Harvey, James Cater, Benjamin Swallows, Red Martin, Iron Grinch, Nicholas Conomos, Colorblind Magic, and Daniel Etherington. And to our YouTube members, Green Roots Gaming, Ronya, Lock Lorick, The Johnny84, David Ellsworth, Wolfric Nick, Broken Chef, Ariane Edwards, Revenar, Pink Nico Fire, Robin Mankiller, Monty's Tabletop Terrain, John Castle, Davis Weir, James South, James Tillman, and Dylan Areno. And lastly, a special thanks to Lady Witchfox Art, who does all the amazing artwork you see here for the channel, and to everyone who helps run our Discord server, all our mods, you're fantastic, and everyone who makes it a great place in there as well, and indeed to everyone who helps come and do the battle reports, and to all our sponsors on the channel as well. Thank you all once again for watching, everyone. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the Grey. Ciao for now.